Hi, everyone. It's Nikki Adamson here of Hustle Hunters and the show Defining Talent Startup Superheroes. Welcome to the new year. This is our first one that we're recording here in January 2024. And I'm so excited to be joined here by an amazing founder, mom, human, where we get to talk a lot about transferable skills and thinking about how that applies into startup building. So, Sehreen, I'm so excited to have you here. Thanks so much for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk about this topic. It's such a good one.
Yeah. Well, you were posting recently on LinkedIn about how some qualities from like even your childhood life have really shown up in your founding journey. So I'm excited to dig into that. But to kick things off, I'd love to hear from you as we talk to every person on our show. Like, when did you first start thinking about talent and team building as part of your career?
At the very beginning, I started my career at the State Department. And what was cool about their role was that I was just kind of thrown into something. I got into this fellowship program, and it's like, oh, this is where you're placed. And I was suddenly someone very young managing a team of engineers to create a digital diplomacy product. And so at that point, I was like, "That's interesting." I went from, like, 0 to 1 overnight, and I learned a lot from that team because people were really seasoned, how to collaborate across cultures too, because we were all from kinda different backgrounds, and so
Oh,
we saw that kind of, like, soccer team mentality towards how do you build people, how do you switch people out, how do you make it to the end goal? And then that kind of just resonated throughout my career, really.
yeah, I love any time that we pull in a sports team analogy into like
Yeah.
team building. I find the family analogy to be fairly toxic. We all have different relationships with family. My daughter has been asking a lot lately, can you get fired from your family? I think she's watching Boss Baby. I think they toy
I
in with
love
that.
that.
But
Yeah.
it's had me thinking a lot of like, oh yeah, that's not how I want to think about my work teammates. We're more like a sports team, right? Where
No,
sometimes the
no,
person that was right on our team for a while is no longer the right person on that team. And yeah, sometimes you have to take a different
totally.
role depending
Well,
on
it's also
what
like the
our
family
team entails.
analogy is the family analogy has something about it that is like more a reflection of our culture of like needing more connection or needing more something on the emotional side that I think in the work side doesn't work. Like I'm pretty happy with boundaries between work and my personal life. That's always been pretty important to me. Maybe that makes me old. Does that make me old?
I know. I mean, I think back to like my first startup experience was in the Bay Area where there's a lot of transplants and a lot of folks didn't have any
Mhm,
family there. And I could see
mhm.
how, like, yeah, there was kind of this dearth of like connection and community that, this was who they went out with every night. This was who they spent a lot
Yep.
of holidays with. So I could see where there was kind of that desire. But then as my life has gone through different stages, especially becoming a parent, like that wasn't the priority anymore. I wasn't seeking deep familial connection from my
Yeah.
coworkers anymore.
And I think that that connection is so important though, right? I think it's the nature of
Yes,
like what top down you're told more than right?
totally.
Because I know that a lot of people, young people now, like we talk about it's like, oh, well, how are they meeting each other? How are they creating those work friendships that are very enduring? Like I started at the State Department and there was like a really regular culture of like post-work happy hours, and people have kept up those connections. Like it's a very DC thing. I think it works out well. And then DC specifically has its own kind of talent culture that was so different from the startup system. Like nobody talked about the State Department being a family, but there was a sense of we're in the government. We need to make things work for the American people. And that was very unifying, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's where like we can have a really unifying mission
Yeah.
but also have boundaries. And I find that where you see layoffs and where you see kind of these like really big collapses, both of companies and of teams, and a lot of lost trust between employees and employers, I do find, especially in the startup space, I find a lot of that comes because there was a really strong, I think we were expecting too much of our employers and that to
Yeah.
feel, we're feeling more betrayed than
Mm.
maybe we should be because, we were kind of putting them in a different position more than an employer, right? And I
Yeah.
think part of that is we were asking people to do a lot. And what I hear from candidates all the time is they want to have an impact. they want to have an impact in the world, and they want to have an impact on the teams that they're on, which is why they look to join in the startup land. So I'd love to learn a little bit more specifically kind of on your founder journey. Like, how did you get to that why, that big mission of what you're working on at Sleuth? And like, how did you know that you really needed to build in this space?
I often say it's because, I mean, and you know the story. It's like I started because I couldn't get good information about my daughter's health. And I ended up having to leave a good job to figure it out. And it always struck me as really strange that in our era, technology hadn't applied itself to this pervasive problem. Like 38 million, there are 38 million searches a week on Google about kids' health and development.
Oh my gosh.
That's a lot. And so why was Dr. Google and Facebook groups our best option? And that's in that story, it really came like Sleuth, the opportunity kind of just fell in my lap. I didn't really have strong intentions to create a VC-backed company, but I met my co-founder. I participated in an incubator program. But now that I had a little space over the holidays to think, I've been building a business in my head since the age of 6. Like, I am constantly thinking, what is a scalable solution to this problem? And I think I am obsessed actually with that framework. And so when this kind of really personal thing came and the right co-founder came and the right opportunity came, it was the right alchemy to actually start it.
I think a lot to Sarah Blakely's story of starting Spanx. And, I read it in Reid Hoffman's book, forgetting the name of it, but, he talks a lot about how plenty of women had cut the feet off of their tights before. Like, he wasn't the first person to do that, but
Right.
she was a person who was like actively had made herself ready and was practicing and was like ready for her business to start and had kind of like opened herself to that opportunity. So it sounds like that's definitely kind of a similar piece. And as this is kind of a theme throughout your life, I'm super intrigued into like, what are some of these experiences from age 6 and beyond that you're finding now that you're like actually doing it, right? You're actually building that
Yeah.
business with the right person on the right challenge that's really meaningful to you. Like, which of those experiences can you tie back to say like, oh yeah, that one is really solid and showing up every day in my work?
Yeah, I think the biggest theme was there was a lot of expectations when I was young to be a self-starter. My parents were really busy. My